Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Dennis Schuler. I'm your moderator of Vendapunct, Inflection Points for Senior Leaders. And I'm going to be joined shortly by two brothers, Leon Zakaria and Ike Zakaria, who are running a fashion retailer for young women out in Los Angeles. They inherited this business from their dad when I think it was like 25 stores 27 years ago. They've been running it in tandem since. And they've grown it to over 200 stores, and it's one of the most successful companies in the space. Now, as you might imagine, in retail, this company was crushed during the last year in terms of business results. All of their stores typically are in malls, and with states closing their businesses and malls closing, their business dried up almost overnight. I saw the two of them in Los Angeles last February, and they were coming off a record year and a record start to 2020. And within a month, they were closing almost all of their business and their revenue dropped almost 90%. But that's not the real story I want to capture today. It's the story of brotherly love at one end of it. It's the other end of it is how you build resilience into an organization when it's going through the depths of an unprecedented crisis that we've all experienced. And the lessons they've taken away and the lessons I hope you'll take away about how you can be a much more progressive, thoughtful leader as you help navigate your organizations through the stormy waters of COVID and beyond. So with that as a way of introduction, let me just tell you that Leon, who's the CEO of the business, was born and raised in Los Angeles, went to Georgetown School of Foreign Service, and the Anderson School, where he got his EMBA in 1997. He had his early involvement in real estate development, and he's handled all of the functions that you would expect on his way up to become the CEO. His brother Ike is the merchandising manager, and he's got an eye for fashion. He's actually a lawyer, graduated from Cardozo School of Law, obviously born and raised in Los Angeles as well, given he's a family member. But his experience at Windsor includes all the aspects of buying, selling, and trend and design. And he now occupies the chief merchandising officer role. So I think it'll be a real treat for you today to listen and learn from two brothers that are bonded at the hip, running a great business, and have developed an exceptionally strong culture that helps them weather the storm of COVID, but also helps them put forth a proposition to consumers, which is delightful. You hear them talk about the oasis. Typically, their stores are an oasis within a mall, and the malls can be pretty dispiriting. Their business has to be the shining star and the anchor point in malls. But they also talk about the oasis as an oasis of a place where you can be yourself as an employee. And they talk about inverting the pyramid. And I've witnessed and I've watched them do this, and they really mean what they say. So join me for a rollicking tour of retail with two of the best people I know on earth, Leon and Ike Zakaria. I think you guys got great stories to tell. And so I was really happy when you accepted the invite, because I know you're busy as hell and Ike's hanging out in Beverly Hills all the time, grooving, but I'm glad you guys made it anyway.
We're grateful you asked us. Thank you.
So I was going to start with, if I could, you both are in fashion retail for quite some time, but I want to drift back in time and talk about the early forces that shaped your thinking about what you do today. I know you grew up in a family of retailers and you're close to your parents, and obviously your dad, mom started the business that you guys are entrusted with now. But I was curious around the forces that shaped you. It could be people, stories, events, things that happened to you that got you interested in and confirmed that, this is the career path I want to take. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well,
this is the first time I've done a three-way, so you guys will have to play off each other as brothers.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Well, we're brothers, obviously, so our stories are going to overlap quite a bit. And it's actually kind of a strategy of how we run the business. But we were both born into this business, sort of, and this is all our parents talked about at the dinner table. My father was not one to have boundaries in terms of business and family, and everything was blended together. He was a serial entrepreneur, a workaholic. We were exposed to his antics, his ups and downs, um, and if you would have told me early on in my life, especially as I was in school and doing things, finding different interests, that I was going to be in the dress business, that would not have, it wasn't something I wanted to be, right, as a kid, that to sell dresses or, but it ended up being, sort of in a way, kind of a family obligation, but also an opportunity that we saw. So it wasn't something we necessarily dreamed of doing. I'm not sure if I'm speaking for Ike, but I imagine I am.
Yeah.
But we kind of slowly, little by little, got into it, and then all of a sudden you're in, and then all of a sudden, fast forward 30, 40 years later, and here we are. So just kind of how life happens sometimes. It's not, and it sort of goes with, I think, in life in general, that I don't think people think like you have to find your passion. I think you make your passion. And I think that's true in work. It's true in relationships and finding a spouse, that there is nothing, no perfect situation that matches you exactly. And if you're looking for that, I think you may be disappointed. But that's sort of how, on my end, how I fell into it.
Or to that point, and I totally agree, Leon. It wasn't exactly something we chose. Leon mentioned obligation, some opportunity. What's interesting is that when Leon and I really got involved, my parents were kind of at the tail end of a successful run, but really for a handful of years, they were really struggling. So when we got involved, they were actually even meeting with bankruptcy attorneys and stuff. Yep. And so we knew that, number one, they needed help. And number two, it could just be a short window of help because the business may not be around. And we had very little time to kind of stabilize the ship. And so at the end of the day, we were able to turn it around, but we did tread water for 15 years in the process. I mean, it was not easy. And I think the big takeaway from me when I compare it to today's generation is that most people wouldn't tolerate 15 years of basically treading water, right? Today, people want, more immediate gratification. What's in it for me in the 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. But, we had hoped that it could really lead to something one day. We worked, I think you mentioned passion. We worked passionately. And I guess not taking our eye off the ball was really key for us because there were a lot of distractions. There were a lot of other ways we could have gone. But we stuck with it. Leon's point, Leon studied international studies and relations at Georgetown, and I went to law school. So dresses was not at the top of our list.
I thought my vision that you guys would have some bolts of fabric in your childhood bedrooms. You'd be cutting out different designs and so forth. Nothing like that, huh?
No. Nothing remotely.
I did read, which I didn't realize. I had my crack researcher, my son, do a little research. I didn't realize how close you guys were back. This is a 2000 article in the Wall Street. How close your dad was around skirting potential bankruptcy. That there was some lean years. This goes back to, I think, 2000, where your dad had been in the business for 41 years and 25 shops. That must have left an impression on you guys as early as it was.
Yeah, I think that was our foundation, actually. Like having struggled, having seen hard times, it changed the way we view things. we became survivors, which, and there's a great value to surviving. And I think what we figured out is that if you're able to survive, you'll get to a point where others have not survived, or where there's like a great recession or now a pandemic. And then there's a lot of opportunity that comes after those periods. So I think that's one of the things that we did learn from that.
I think, it's actually in our value statement. It's doing more with less, right? We had to be creative. We had to be scrappy. It wasn't an option. But at the same time, I think that gave us a competitive edge when it came to work ethic and really having to rely on relationships and good people and culture to get through, as opposed to just kind of throwing money at a problem. So we didn't have that option. So,
I want to explore that a little bit. We're going to get to the culture because you guys got a unique culture at Windsor. But I wanted to ask you, again, you guys are living, breathing embodiments of growing up in a family that had a business. What were the unique aspects of working in that kind of setting where work life kind of blended together? Your dad, from all accounts, was a really hard-working guy that I think he was 24/7. I read the article. He'd make the rounds of calls every night at 9:00. So it permeated every aspect of your life. What were the stresses and strains and the positive negatives of growing up in a founder-led family?
Well, so both my father and mother were involved in building and founding the business. My mother got involved later, about the time that Ike was born, and we learned a lot from both of them, right? So like we said, there was no boundaries. My dad had a crazy passion for the business. It was a little bit erratic and hard to be around. Classic entrepreneur, very up and down, he worked himself to where he got. It wasn't, there weren't a ton of systems, but he did it because he was willing to work all hours to get it done. We learned different things from each of our parents. From my mother, it was sort of the calm perseverance. She didn't get rattled easily. She was a steady Eddie, and she was just kind of focused and very supportive of everybody, but incredibly important and integral to the company. And my father was kind of the seat of the pants, gut feeling, very risk oriented, loved taking risks, to the point where when he was 65, 70 years old, even beyond, he wanted to bet it all, on different opportunities. And we were the ones who we were much younger saying, whoa, hold back, Dad. Let's, that's how he was.
I think in one word, if one word were to sum it up, it would be anxiety, because, it was, the good times were good, the bad times were bad, and we were all in the same lifeboat, and to Leon's point, at 65, 70, my dad mortgages the house to the hilt, right? Mortgages every property that he has to keep the business alive another 6 months. And we're all there with him, right? And none of us are diversified. And I'm sleeping on a couch in law school because I can't afford an apartment. And we were all in it together, which was, and that's where Leon talks about survival. And so it really was challenging, because that's all you knew.
And you both mentioned, you mentioned anxiety. You mentioned the ups and downs, Leon. How does that shape how you lead your organizations today? Because we all take lessons from our experiences about what to do and what not to do. What are the lessons that you took away from that experience?
I think what we learned from our role models and our parents was how to be a human being. And what I mean by that, in Yiddish, actually, the word for human is mensch, which you may have heard. And it's actually a great compliment in the Yiddish culture. It means you're a human, right? And we were around people that were, first and foremost, were humans, and they treated other people with respect like humans. And the loyalty that comes from that type of connection is very intense. And it's why people have been with us. It's not uncommon that, people have been with us for over 20 years, even over 30 years. It's what is the family culture. There's a great value in that. And we really believe that's the best way to run the business. It's the way that feels good. And it's what's worked, because in the end, when the business grows larger and larger, it's not us that runs the business. It's the culture that runs the business. So any investment in time in the culture is going to save us a tremendous amount of time, and we wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. It's really the secret sauce for us.
Yeah, Ike, what about you?
Your question exactly is
your lessons you take away from your experiences, and how that manifests how you lead today, and what you tried to kind of extol in the organization you have today.
I think one of the things we've come to understand over time, and we say this over and over again, is that things are never as bad as they seem, and they're also never as good as they seem. And with that, we know that if we're on an upward trend, it probably means you need to work harder and stay focused and keep everybody energized during the good times and the bad times, but especially during the good times. Like we've learned that you can't really sit back, and that you don't want to sit back. And so I think that's the big takeaway for us, is that,
I think the other thing that we may have learned, Ike, sorry to interrupt, but I think that both of us, we watched our parents go, ride the roller coaster of retail. And retail is a roller coaster. It's like you're only as good as you were yesterday, right? And you feel that. And it's really very hard to separate yourself from the numbers, because it's a business of numbers. You can check the business, the numbers every hour if you wanted to, and drive yourself crazy. And to Ike's point, it's never as good. It's never all that good or all that bad. It's like you have to keep the perspective, and that's taken us a long time to figure out, and we're still working on that.
And we've actually, we have found it. Leon and I, we, after my dad passed away about 10 years ago, we continued to call the stores, right? And at that time there was 60, 70 stores. And we said, hey, we need to pick up that role. And while that's great, emotionally, it was very, very taxing on us. And so we consciously have made a decision to step away from the day-to-day numbers. I mean, we look at them every day, but we didn't need to have them in real time, because obviously it was just affecting our moods and our ability to actually step back and perform and inspire others. Just couldn't do it in that environment. So
tell me a little bit about culture. One of the things I notice about both you guys, and I think one of the reasons why, if I can speak for Sun just for a minute, we love working with you guys, because you're both value-driven leaders. I mean, that's very evident. Like, it only takes like a few seconds to figure that out. But how do you take the sense of values, and you mentioned now you got well over a couple hundred stores. How do you inculcate those values of, family, customer service, do more with less, to your point, Ike, earlier? How do you personify that throughout your organization, given that the front line is 3 or 4 levels removed from the two of you? So you have to rely upon people to actually pick up and understand what they need to do and the values by which you run the business. How do you make sure you have that honed to an art and reinforce that continually.
Well, Lee, you probably want to talk about your Oasis chats at some level, but I can just say for me, and I don't impact the company's culture quite the way Leon does. I kind of more work with a team of buyers and third-party suppliers, but I think it's honestly just leading by example, and treating people, being mentioned as Leon mentioned earlier. Uh, Also not always having to be the smartest person in the room, right? Like we like to say that we're constantly learning, that we know very little, in fact. The more you know in our business and retail, the more you think you know, the more of a problem it is, because you have to be super flexible. And I think, we learn from everybody around us. We learn from our employees. And I think that is contagious and that trickles down. So in that respect, I think people kind of see and look at us and look at our executive team and understand that we're all kind of like that. But Leon has actually started something called Oasis Chats, which really helped trickle it down to the 3,000 employees we have, because that's the challenge. So maybe you can speak to that, Lee.
Well, yeah, I think like how we keep it going when you grow so much, having the right people in place is absolutely critical, and empowering them. So there's a couple parts to that. First, how you hire people. So hiring, even at the lowest levels, we've had, in fact, our director of HR, Meta's right-hand person, Dennis, Christina Diaz, was our receptionist. Our head, general merchandisers were salespeople. Not everybody started from within the company, but they knew that there was opportunity to grow within the company, which is an incredible example for others, by the way. But sometimes we had to hire in, and when we hired in, we lots of people would interview them. All the people that we trusted who already had the Windsor values in them were part of the process. So, it's easy for one person to miss something, but if it's a whole group thing, we all discuss it. We all have to agree on it. And when they finally do get on the team, they're entrusted, they're empowered to do their thing. And then what you find is that on the field, good people hire other good people. So it becomes, very scalable.
It's interesting. It just reminds me of a story that, also just kind of being humble and open to feedback as leaders, right? And kind of checking your ego at the door. I one time was doing a review, probably about 10, 15 years ago, of one of our, general merchandise managers. And this was before like 360 reviews were a thing. And I do this review, and it's like a 5-page review, and I'm reading it through, and she, she looks at me, she goes, "Okay, great, thank you. Are you done?" And I said, "Yes, I'm done." And she then proceeds to pull out a list from her pocket and go through all the things that I need to do, right? And ways that I can improve as her manager. And that was like, you're going to make a decision at that point, right? That's an inflection point. Like, are you going to accept this, and is this how it's going to be? And then once you decide, yes, this is what I want. And then I think that's just, it permeates, the rest of the company.
Well, I think that goes down to the upside down pyramid, where you think when you're at the top, you have all these people reporting to you, but the reality is that you are reporting to everybody. And I think that's pretty much how we both feel, is that we're caretakers of the organization, and we have to watch out for everybody. And it's a reversal of what the hierarchy that people usually think of.
And why is that, Leon? Like, because that's the other thing that I noticed about you guys. Listen, I worked in very traditional companies, top down, big pyramids. You managed the pyramids. The folks at the bottom of the pyramid always felt like you're at the bottom of the pyramid. As opposed when you flip it, leadership takes the very progressive view is my role is to help you and enable you to win. Because if I do that, you're going to see the issues, you're going to counsel, you're going to sell more effectively when I know you have my back. And you guys do that pretty naturally. Why is that? Because I don't think that's common. I mean, people talk a lot about it, but they don't normally execute against that proposition. But you guys consistently do.
Yeah. I think it comes with the knowledge that in our business, as really, if anyone really thinks about it in any business, it's usually the people that are lower down on the pyramid, or in our case, higher in the pyramid, that are in contact with our guests or our customers. We don't call them customers, we call them guests. And how do you get somebody on the front line to smile and to care if it's the other way around? If they're just feeling like they're a cog in the system, there's no way it works. So you have to really glorify the people that are on the front line. You have to make them feel like heroes, like winners, and you have to appreciate them. And I think that realization that we have to have literally hundreds and hundreds of people on the floor engaging and smiling genuinely. So they can't fake it. They have to feel it. And that's the only way it works.
And I think, just to piggyback on what Leon's saying, is I think understanding their challenges and their struggle is also really important, and being able to relate to them. And being essentially in the trenches with them, right? So we forever always held a job function. We weren't just leaders, right? But I actually started at store level as a salesperson. And this was after law school, and then moved my way up to an assistant manager of a single store, and then managed a single store. And it was hard. I mean, standing on your feet 8-10 hours a day in customer service. And, and I'm not even wearing heels like most of our employees were. And I was like, geez, how do you guys do this? So we did that with them. As a buyer, I had the same job function as our other buyers. And so you put yourself out there, you're in a vulnerable position because you're putting yourself out there to be judged and comparing your performance to their performance, right? But I think at the end of the day, they really respect that at the same time. When you're like in there with them, doing your best, taking risks, failing at times, and having to be supportive and be supported. So,
yeah, you're part of it as opposed to being separate from it or above it.
Yes, correct.
For sure. And you guys also, I want to come back to this concept of Oasis, both how you personify the business as well as the jump off point you use that as the kind of the fulcrum for communication into your organization. Tell us a little bit about the Oasis, where that concept came from, and how do you leverage it to create that culture that's so unique at Windsor?
So we always knew culture was important, and we had a good culture, but there's one thing knowing that, and the other thing is really communicating it in a way that everyone understands. And you almost need a battle cry, or literally a cheer, which is what it eventually became. But, as an executive team, we were redoing our mission statement and thinking about what would work. And somehow it came up in the meeting. Somebody brought up, oh, well, what are we trying to do? We're trying to create an oasis, right? And somehow it resonated with everybody.
An oasis in the mall, right? Because the mall was like this desert, this dying desert, right? Where retailers were struggling to differentiate themselves. So how do we stand out in that environment, right? How does the customer feel when they see our store and walk in, compared to how they do in the rest of the mall? So.
Well, yeah, exactly. It was an aspiration, which it has to be, and it has to be something that you have to aim really high, and it has to excite everybody, and it has to be something that everybody could contribute to. So like, whether it's on the back end, whether it's the IT department, whether it's the visual merchandising to make the store look beautiful, whether it's the construction teams building the store or the salesperson, um, everybody contributes to this idea of an oasis. And we liked it because it was one word. It was simple. And we started repeating it and applying it to everything. To the point where it was like annoying. We were annoying ourselves that we're talking about it so much. That's when you're actually talking about it enough. And it wasn't just our mission statement ended up being something that was plastered everywhere, but it didn't just collect dust. It's something we actively talked about. And Ike was referring to the Oasis chats, where we have chats every week. We talk about culture. And we have something called Google Currents, where we're constantly interacting. Almost every sale over $200, I personally am involved in congratulating that salesperson on Google Currents. And that takes a lot of time, not just from me, but some of the other key people, where we're talking about, oh, well, thank you for creating the oasis for our guest, or what a great job in creating a wardrobe for our customer, or doing this or doing that, or making her feel special. So it's very aspirational, it's emotional, it's something everyone can relate to. And we repeat it like crazy, and we believe it. We drink the Kool-Aid, and so everybody else does too.
And we put it front and center. So anybody who's in retail knows that Monday morning is the craziest time in retail, because it's when you get in and all the reports are printed out, and you don't want to be bothered by a supplier, a vendor, you need quiet time to process it all. At Windsor, we flipped it on its head and we said, guys, guess what? At Monday morning at 10 a.m., everybody stop. Everybody go into the distribution center, our entire corporate team, and there's going to be a half-hour chat about culture. Oftentimes, nothing about the business. Oftentimes, it could be some inspirational story, something that happened at home, whatever it may be. And there's a chat led by initially, usually Leon. Leon did 9 out of 10 of these chats early on. And we would stream them to everybody in the company, right? Because how do you get it down to everybody in 38 states? And at the end of the chat, there would be a cheer. And then people would comment on the chat. Yeah. And it was fascinating. And then that evolved to, all right, we've heard Leon speak 50 out of 56 weeks. We're ready for other people, right? And other executives started jumping in and saying, hey, I have a thought. I have an inspiration. I have something I'd like to share. I have something that we can improve on, a 1% improvement that I did or that someone else did, right? Recognizing others was a massive part of these chats. It's not just about, some learning, but it's about recognition in a big way. Because we find that that's almost more important than what someone gets paid or their title. It's simply just being recognized. It's that pat on the back. And then we started saying, hey, how about some of these people that we're recognizing at store level leading the chats? So now during COVID, this last year, we've had store managers, salespeople, stylists lead these chats. And it's like this incredible platform. Some of these people are being paid close to minimum wage, and yet they're taking a half hour and addressing the entire company. And it's really, really powerful. and talk about flipping that pyramid. That's like part of another way is to flip that pyramid. So it really snowballs.
And I think it's so cool. And obviously, this has been my field for 40 years. And I can tell you the number of companies that get it, what you guys are expressing and have done. That's why it's so much fun to work with you too. I was going to ask you, when you're bringing people into the company and you're trying to protect, nurture, and continue to develop your culture, what are the things you're looking at that tell you whether or not they're going to be a good fit? Because I remember when I started doing searches with you guys, one of the things you impressed upon me is they might have the technical skill, Dennis, but they got to be able to fit. They got to be able to fit what we do and how we do it as a culture that underpins our success. How do you guys test for that?
You know, it's funny. I actually just had a thought to myself of something my dad used to do. And we don't do this anymore, but it's kind of emblematic of the philosophy. During an interview, he would ask the interviewee, do you mind bringing that chair over here so, you know, we can talk more closely, whatever it is. He would give them an assignment and he would watch the way they walked back and forth to get that chair. And that was actually something that was really important to him. And there was something about figuring out what makes this person tick. What is their sense of urgency? What is, you know, because you cannot possibly train a person with their character, right? That comes from their parents. That comes from something else. And you know, I remember like the most important questions in an interview ended up being, what do you do for fun? What are your hobbies? And just observing the passion within that person and getting a sense for a connection. And we weren't always right about it, but we were all looking for the same kind of spark in that person, that Windsor spark. That is it, and it's not a purely it's not an intellectual thing. It's not something that's academic. It's something you have to feel.
It's interesting. Just pretty early on a lot of our interview processes, even with what you would call a more entry-level position, you know, about 5 minutes in, we'll generally switch gears from the business and say, hey, tell us about your family, you know, and oftentimes they're taken back, you know, tell us about your brothers, tell us about your sisters, tell us about your parents, you know, and just kind of understanding those connections and the importance of family to these people, or you get under that layer, that initial kind of layer of, you know, really quickly, and you see what's kind of inside. And it's usually very telltale, you know, and those people who can explain a story, and they get pretty deep pretty quickly. You know, you'll be surprised what comes out when you ask somebody about their family. We've had people in tears 5 minutes into meeting them in an interview. You know, and that could be a good or a bad thing, but sometimes, you know, usually it's actually a really good thing to talk about that connecting to that passion. Yeah. But we have gotten it wrong more than once, I will say that.
Well, yeah, I don't think there's a perfect batting average that anyone has. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're humans, and we're all come in different shapes and sizes and different things. And sometimes the package is different after you unwrap it than what you're actually getting. But right. you guys are normally on the point, though. That would be my view. I wanted to ask you about COVID for a moment and the impact it's had on your business. Not so much the business in terms of you guys are a lot in malls and states have shut down and it really hurt your business, but what did you learn about yourself along the way during this crisis and about each other and your organization? What surprised you and what was reinforcing? Because, you know, in my view, this is where the test of leadership really gets made, is navigating through these kind of stormy stormy seas, like the old adage, good sailors aren't made from calm seas. There's got to be some really good, profound learnings you've had and some surprises along the way. What would you say about that?
I think that's a great question. Usually great questions they're great because you have a good answer. And I think that I feel pretty good about this answer. We really discovered how resilient we were. And, we had created this executive team, and that particular team had not yet been battle tested. And it was a combination of, senior leaders that had been with us for decades and newer people that we had hired with the help of Sun Capital and our private equity partner. And so it was unknown if we had really brought together the right people, whether the chemistry was right, because really in that situation, one weak link could really be very damaging. And it was a team of 10 of us, and stores were, closed. At the beginning, we closed our e-commerce, and here we were on a Zoom call, and we had not done Zoom before. We weren't that type of culture. We were like walking to each other's offices and this. So it was completely unknown. How were we going to react to this situation? And I have to say, the way we came together we didn't get depressed. We didn't wallow in fear. We tackled problems one thing at a time. And that was the only way you can deal with it, because during the pandemic, it's a very crazy type environment we were all in, but it was fluid, it was dynamic. We had to be scrappy. And I have to say, it was really remarkable how every person, even today we had a call, I was looking around that, first of all, we had all the right roles represented in that team to handle these problems. And everyone stepped up. There were no weak links. And it was absolutely critical to getting through. And it feels like there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel now. We feel very encouraged, and it would not have been without this team and and I think we have tremendous confidence now. Like, this is, we really believe in ourselves now more than ever because of what we went through.
Ike, what about you?
I think one of the big takeaways, again, kind of goes back to culture, is that the goodwill you create with your employees, and more interestingly, with your third-party key vendors, which I never really considered all that much. Our suppliers who supply our clothing to us, we've always considered partners. But when you close every single store across the chain on March 17th, and you have tens of millions of dollars of goods that are supposed to be shipped to you, and you've got to tell these third-party suppliers that, some of which are mom and pop businesses, I'm sorry, I can't fulfill this purchase order, or I can't follow through on it, and everything has to stop. And you can't even really pay them. I didn't know what to expect. And it was pretty remarkable. There wasn't a single supplier of well over 100 that caused any kind of problem. And in fact, they were apologizing to us. We feel so badly that this is happening. We are sorry for you. We completely understand. How can we help you? That to me was shocking. That to me was like, okay, this is years and years and years of goodwill and good culture and good partnership that was coming together, probably the most important time. That bond never broke. And so, you learn a lot about your partners at that time. And coming out of it, you're just that much more grateful.
And
Yeah.
Of course, by the way, I'm sorry, Dennis.
If I could just ask Leanna, like just dimensionalize, again, I saw you guys in February. The business was booming. I mean, it really was. It couldn't be better. And then March 17th, you're pulling the plug on the whole operations given COVID. Just dimensionalize what that was from a business standpoint for the listeners who may not be that familiar with Windsor.
Yeah, actually, it's a good context that I think is important. That some people everyone's been affected differently by the pandemic. Some businesses have been devastated. We were one of the businesses that were going to be devastated, just like the travel industry or hotels or airplanes, whatever. Our business was all about, we sell special occasion dresses, and we also sell merchandise for events that happen during the year. Now, all these events are canceled, right? Social distancing is directly against the idea of bringing people together into social gatherings and selling social dresses. So this attacked the very core of our business model. And we knew it was going to be devastating. We forget the fact that the stores are going to be closed for a few months, but there are no events, right? Everyone is staying away from each other. They're staying in their rooms, Zooming, right? So this was, and wearing sweatpants. This was a disaster for our business, just to put it in perspective, right? So we had to ask our employees to take pay cuts, our vendors, our landlords. It was a drawn out negotiation with all these different parties. Everybody had to play well in the sandbox. Our banks.
I mean, just as a frame of reference, revenue went from $25 million in a month, $20 to $25 million in a month, to $500,000 the next month and the next month. So pretty drastic. I mean, the business stopped.
Yeah. Right. And it was just, if it was just those 3 months, it would have been okay. We maybe could have figured that out, but this was prolonged, and we didn't know when it was going to end. And in the end, now that we see the business coming back and everything that we did, everyone believing in us even more, including our landlords, our banking partners, and most importantly, our private equity partner, Mark Leader, the head of Sun Capital, comes to us a few weeks ago. I'm not sure if you know about this, Dennis, but he tells us, we would like you to open hundreds of stores as soon as possible. And this year, in the next 12 months, we're hoping to open 100 stores and expand our chain dramatically.
So the irony is,
this is off your.
The irony is, it took us 100.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, the irony is, it took us 40 years to open the first 100 stores. Then, over 5 years with Sun Capital, we opened another 100. Now, immediately after the pandemic, in the next 12 months, we're opening another 100. So, getting through this, you're a witch just getting through this and the opportunity, right? But none of this would be available without culture and partners and great support.
So both of you
you have to create that.
Yeah, I want to explore this concept of resilience just for a minute, because both of you are talking about that, the resilience of the organization. How do you, for others that are going through the same firestorm, how do you create a resilient organization? The reason I ask it is I remember we dropped into your company, like we did many others, a pulse survey, just to kind of read the pulse of the organization during the depth of the pandemic. And your results were unbelievably good. I mean, I don't mean that unbelievable in terms I didn't believe it. It's just they were stellar, which said there was a lot of good spade work in terms of helping people understand what the situation was, why you're taking the action you're taking, a pretty steady rhythm of communication to keep people informed. And people were excited about, hey, when we come back, we're coming back stronger. That sense of resilience and confidence, a lot of companies can't lay claim to that. So how did you do that? How did you navigate? How did you manage that during this really tough business situation? Unprecedented.
Yeah, it was unprecedented, right? That's the word we heard all the time. It was very tricky. And HR department did an amazing job of staying in touch with everybody. And it was tricky. And so we couldn't do the Oasis chats anymore. So what were we going to do, right? So we started, we found ways to do recordings. Like I did some audio recordings that we delivered via our payroll system. So it was the only way that we could actually talk to people who were no longer on the payroll, right? But they would periodically check for updates. And when they checked for updates, we ping them, here's another update. And it'd be a little speech from me, usually saying, we don't know what's going on. Hang in there. We're doing our best. I usually didn't have good news to deliver, but we were honest about what was going on. And we were appealing to everybody to be patient and to believe in the process. And I think that because at Windsor, the primary people work at Windsor is not because of the pay, it's because of the experience and because of the connection. That's what allows for resilience, because that's why they're going to come back, because it means something more than a paycheck to them.
Ike, you want to add on that? That's great, Leon. Ike, you want to add on that?
No, thank you. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, I know it's hard to top, but it's right? It's right in the mark. Hey, let me ask you, we talked a little about what was going on inside the company. When you think about your business externally with the guest, the consumer, the shopper, however you describe it, how has COVID changed? And I don't know if it's fundamental, but it certainly changed the landscape in terms of retail and how people shop the particular category. What do you visualize in terms of what the new normal might be in a business like yours?
Well, one thing that it has changed is because, the customer is not as event driven. It's more about, especially now, about wardrobing, so we actually have our stylists, when they're engaging the customer, the question used to be, what event are you shopping for? Now it's more like it's a broader approach to selling, which has actually strengthened us, because we couldn't sell so many special occasion dresses. So we had to compensate by selling more tops and bottoms and casual dresses and accessories. So that was a whole different approach to selling. And I hope that our guest now knows us for not just the fancy dress, that we do a lot more. So we maybe develop some new capacities and skills.
Mm-hmm. Exciting. How do you, just a corollary of that, I'm just curious, how do you keep in touch with and spot where the consumer or guest heads are? Classically, you might have done that in a more traditional way, but in a more physical proximity ways. But given we're socially distanced, how do you keep abreast of the trends, what people are interested in, what their buying habits might be, and how they might change? How are your stylists kind of navigating that?
We rely, you're right, we did rely on a lot of store feedback from what customers would say, but when the stores were closed, it was really, we had to rely on e-commerce, what search words were trending, what were the top 5 search words that week, that day, what color were they looking for. And so we were relying on kind of our marketing team to relay that information to us. And then also really just social media, like really watching what was happening on Instagram and what people were featuring. And couldn't use our customer that much, but we could still identify who our target customer was and what they were seeing on social media and online. And that really kind of helped dictate the direction we would go in terms of the fashion direction.
Mm-hmm. And guys, I'm mindful of your time, but I had a couple questions more if I could. When you think about your business now going forward, you were going to come out of this. I got my 2 jabs so I can travel again. So I'm out in the world is slowly opening up. Well, all I got to tell you, I was on a flight last week for the first time in 2-3 months. And I was excited about it. But after spending 3 hours in the tarmac with no information about the delay, it was like, yeah, I really haven't missed this that much along the way. But I was wondering, as you guys think about 2 to 3, 3 to 5 years out, how do you see Windsor as a business out that in that time frame? Obviously, we're going to add a whole bunch of stores onto the chassis, if you will. But what are things are you hoping that your business will be able to do, both business-wise and organizationally and culturally?
Well, of course, the Oasis is front and center, right? As we scale, we have to continue to be creative to find ways to communicate the Oasis and make sure it's getting to everybody. And I think at this point we're sort of the last man standing, right? So, but new people will emerge, new competitors will come up. So we have to always be hungry, be doing things well, be improving constantly. One of our values is need to improve all the time. And we've improved through the pandemic, and there's been a lot of lessons learned. And we need to take that into the future and continue learning.
Mike, what about you? It's a little frozen.
Yeah, interesting, because anytime we cut, oh, am I frozen? Thanks.
Yeah, you're okay now.
How about now? It says I'm an unstable. Yep, thank you.
We won't even.
So
anytime we won't even go there. We won't even go there. We're just going to let that one pass around.
Yeah. Exactly. That time we come out, whether it's a recession, in 2009 or this pandemic that we're coming out of still, we scale back, right? We scale back payroll. We do only what's necessary, right? And during the good years, you add a lot of kind of unnecessary fat on, right? And you don't even realize you're adding all these layers of fat. But during the pandemic, even though, sales were terrible, we actually improved EBITDA significantly on our e-commerce platform. And we did so by just watching expenses and how we do things. So going forward, I think some of the things learned, if we can hold on to those as we layer on revenue, we're even going to be a much stronger business than we were before. So I look forward to, keeping those learnings as best we can, knowing that we can still do more with less, and basically bring that stuff to the bottom line.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Last question for you two. Again, less of the experience question, but for young people that are considering a career in retail, what advice would you have for them?
All right. Well, first of all, retail is an amazing opportunity, but it's important you understand what retail is all about. It's really good for people that like to be doing different things all the time, and people that like to be connected to other people. It's definitely a people business, but it's also a business of systems, where there are lots of systems that have to work and be in place for it to work. It's fairly complex, even though it seems simple, but in the end, to deliver the product and to make it look good and to have this tremendous IT involved, and omni-channel and marketing, it involves everything, right? So it's a great opportunity to learn so many different trades. So that's number one. That if you like that type of stimulation, of challenge, you're going to be challenged. And the other thing is that there's a lot of fluctuations, lots of ups and downs. So you have to be able to learn how to handle that. You're gonna be stressed, and but you have to learn how to be calm and focused. And in the end, you have to learn how to empower people, because you can't do it by yourself. And it's a lot of work, a lot of systems, and a lot of empowerment.
Ike, what about you?
I would just say, when it comes to retail, you just have to kind of jump in, with 2 feet. I used to lecture at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, and I would see these students, very thoughtful, very smart, but when it came to actually working at Windsor and applying themselves, it's a different beast when you're actually really doing it. And so, and I would say, if you think you want to have a career in retail, try it. All right. Try it before you say, hey, I'm going to commit to 4 years of school and X and Y and Z. Get your feet wet, learn about it. And there really are no shortcuts, right? You have to be patient with the process. So as long as you have an understanding of what it is that you want to get involved with, and you're patient, right? You've got the long vision ahead. I think you'll be okay. And I think you'll be great. You'll love it. I mean, it is fun. And if you like adrenaline, if you like to kind of, like Leon said, always something new. And it's the ultimate horse race, right? You're every day, there's a winner, there's a loser, you did well. You get immediate kind of gratification oftentimes, it's a great business. It's exciting. So
I have to ask this bonus question, because I'm watching you two on the screen here. What's it like to work with each other? Again, rare that we see brothers working together as long as you two have. And maybe I'll trim this out of the interview later, depending on what I hear. But, what's it like working in the same business together as brothers?
I love this question, in part because, like Leon said, I think there's a good answer. I've been asked before, how often do you guys fight? You guys must fight all the time. And people don't believe us when we say rarely ever. And this is despite the first 20 years. We've been at it for about 27 years now together. The first 20 years or so, we shared a tiny office, a 15-foot by 15-foot office. We had a big building, but we had 2 desks in one office. And it's been wonderful. It did take a little while to get there, to understand how to work together. But to Leon's credit, I think this, sharing the same office, he always wanted to make sure that I knew everything that was going on in his world, right? And vice versa. I would share everything with him. So we were kind of cross-training each other in that sense. And at the same time, I understood that there needs to be a leader at some point. There needs to be a single leader. And I was okay with Leon kind of taking that role. And I was okay because I realized how good he was at it. So, so I guess my point is really understanding each other's strengths and roles. And I felt like Leon gave me that same kind of respect when it came to merchandising the stores. And he gave me a ton, all the leash I wanted. And so I think that mutual respect and kind of trusting that the other person knows what they're doing, while at the same time knowing your place in the business, right? And so that for me is key.
That's cool.
That's a great way of describing it, Ike. I mean, first of all, we love each other, right? So that it starts at that. That's the foundation, right? So We shared a bedroom when we were kids, and we shared an office as adults. But beyond that, how do you maintain that? And it's, I think I expressed it perfectly, but it was a lot of communication, and that we enjoyed talking. We enjoyed talking shop, talking about what was going on, and we bounced ideas off of each other constantly, and we got each other's insights. And I think we also deviated from the traditional model of like how family members sort of divide up and conquer. We unified. We had a lot of overlap, and we were, Ike was in a lot of real estate meetings. I was in a lot of merchandising meetings, and to the point where we fully understood what the other person was involved in. So it was sort of like the DNA, like every DNA molecule knows exactly all the other functions. It was, we were connected that deeply. And it just like any marriage partnership, it's communication.
Mm-hmm. To the point of, I'd be lying if I didn't, in time, 3:00 in the afternoon, 4 meetings going on. Leon would say, Ike, come sit down on the couch. I want to download for a half an hour. Just listen to me on what my day was like. And there were some eye rolls, like really, but it's that half an hour, that connection that makes it all work.
Yeah. Good on you two. I mean, listen, you guys are just two great leaders. And listen, this has been a great fast hour. I thought it would be because you guys are just so on top of your game. But all the success that you have and the success you have in the future is richly deserved. I couldn't think of two better people to interview today, and also to watch what you're doing with the business, what you've done and what you'll do with the business. It's just been nothing short of phenomenal. So I appreciate your time.
And Dennis,
it's been good fun.
You've been a great guide for us as well. And, there are very few people who can come in as a consultant and understand the business as quickly as you did and have and guide us as we were building our executive team. A lot of credit goes to you, and we thank you for that. So.
I appreciate that. And keep your office door locked, Ike, because when I come out in Los Angeles, if I lose weight, I'm going to steal your wardrobe. I keep telling you.
Yeah, it sounds good.
All right.
Sounds good.
Guys, thanks a lot. Really good seeing both of you. You look great. You look healthy. You look hale, and you look primed for future success. I wish you all of it, truly.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Same to you.
Thank you for having us.